Aloha, welcome back. We are on Screwtape letter 4 today. Today's letter has a theme of being about authentic prayer. Marlon De La Torre has a beautiful quote from St. Therese of Lisieux that I'd like to start us off with. She said, "For me, prayer is a surge of the heart. It's a simple look turned towards heaven. It's a cry of recognition and of love, embracing both trial and joy." Thank you for returning another day. I hope your Lent is off to a quiet, contemplative start. For me, it's had its ups and downs, undulations, as I'll talk about later on with the other letters. But as I've mentioned before, God is my strength, and I am finding myself constantly returning to Him because as far as God goes, I have nowhere else to go for help. I mean, I have my wife, I have my kids, I have all my friends and the men in my life, and so many people in our church community that we all, live around each other and help each other get to heaven, like I mentioned yesterday. But God is the one I really, really find myself wanting to go to more and more, especially during Lent. So with that, let's read today's reading. My dear Wormwood, the amateurish suggestions in your last letter warn me that it is high time for me to write to you fully on the painful subject of prayer. You might have spared the comment that my advice about his prayers for his mother proved singularly unfortunate. That is not the sort of thing that a nephew should write to his uncle, nor a junior tempter to the undersecretary of a department. It also reveals an unpleasant desire to shift responsibility. You must learn to pay for your own blunders. The best thing, where it is possible, is to keep the patient from the serious intention of praying altogether. When the patient is an adult recently converted to the enemy's party, like your man, this is best done by encouraging him to remember, or to think he remembers, the parrot-like nature of his prayers in childhood. In reaction against that, he may be persuaded to aim at something entirely spontaneous, inward, informal, and unregularized. And what this will actually mean to a beginner will be an effort to produce in himself a vaguely devotional mood in which real concentration of will and intelligence have no part. One of their poets, Coleridge, has recorded that he did not pray with moving lips and bended knees, but merely composed his spirit to love, and indulged a sense of supplication. That is exactly the sort of prayer we want, and since it bears a superficial resemblance to the prayer of silence, as practiced by those who are very far advanced in the enemy's service, clever and lazy patients can be taken in by it for quite a long time. At the very least, they can be persuaded that the bodily position makes no difference to their prayers, for they constantly forget what you must always remember, that they are animals, and that whatever their bodies do affects their souls. It is funny how mortals always picture us as putting things into their minds. In reality, our best work is done by keeping things out. If this fails, you must fall back on a subtler misdirection of his intention. Whenever they are attending to the enemy himself, we are defeated, but there are ways of preventing them from doing so. The simplest is to turn their gaze away from him, towards themselves, keep them watching their own minds and trying to produce feelings there by the action of their own wills. When they meant to ask him for charity, let them instead start trying to manufacture charitable feelings for themselves and not notice that this is what they are doing. When they meant to pray for courage, let them really be trying to feel brave. When they say they're praying for forgiveness, let them be trying to feel forgiven. Teach them to estimate the value of each prayer by their success in producing the desired feeling, and never let them suspect how much success or failure of that kind depends on whether they are well or ill, fresh or tired at the moment. But of course the enemy will not meantime be idle. Whenever there is prayer, there is danger of his own immediate action. He is cynically indifferent to the dignity of his position and ours as pure spirits and to human animals on their knees. He pours out self-knowledge in a quite shameless fashion. But even if he defeats your first attempt at misdirection, we have a subtler weapon. The humans do not start from that direct perception of him which we, unhappily, cannot avoid. They have never known that ghastly luminosity, that stabbing and searing glare which makes the background of permanent pain to our lives. If you look into your patient's mind when he's praying, you will not find that. If you examine the object to which he is attending, you will find that it is a composite object containing many quite ridiculous ingredients. There will be images derived from pictures of the enemy as he appeared during the discreditable episode known as the Incarnation. There will be vaguer, perhaps quite savage and puerile images associated with the other two persons. There will even be some of his own reverence and of bodily sensations accompanying it, objectified and attributed to the object revered. I have known cases where what the patient called his God was actually located up and to the left at the corner of the bedroom ceiling, or inside his own head, or in a crucifix on the wall. But whatever the nature of the composite object, you must keep him praying to it, to the thing that he has made, not to the person who has made him. You may even encourage him to attach great importance to the correction and improvement of his composite object, and to keeping it steadily before his imagination during the whole prayer. For if he ever comes to make the distinction, if ever he consciously directs his prayers, not to what I think thou art, but to what thou knowest thyself to be, our situation is for the moment desperate. Once all of his thoughts and images have been flung aside, or if retained with a full recognition of their merely subjective nature, and the man trusts himself to the completely real, external, invisible presence, there with him in the room, and never knowable by him as he is known by it, why, then it is that the incalculable may occur. In avoiding this situation, this real nakedness of the soul in prayer, you will be helped by the fact that the humans themselves do not desire it as much as they suppose. There's such a thing as getting more than they bargained for. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. And that's Screwtape letter 4. Oh man, this is a good letter today. I mean, they all are, but I especially like this one. They just keep getting better and better, honestly. I like this one because it's all about prayer. Prayer is the greatest way to get closer to Jesus. So let's get started. So the entire goal of Screwtape and Wormwood in this letter is to keep the patient from developing an authentic prayer life. This is the main theme. This letter is also, in a way, about us making ourselves idols, as Marlon De La Torre speaks about in his study guide. The fear of Wormwood is that if the patient develops a prayer life, they need to make sure that it's not centered on God, but it's centered on idols, and they must keep the patient from walking with God. If you didn't already know, when you pray, that really hurts Satan. Why? Because prayer helps us have a deeper relationship with Jesus, and it makes a block, or like a barrier, as Marlon speaks of, between man and Satan. In this case, Wormwood, Glubos, Screwtape, all those demons. So there's 3 things gleamed from this letter that Screwtape wants Wormwood to focus on. And those are confusion, complacency, and indifference as we move closer to God. They're thinking they don't want the patient to pray, but if he's got to pray, like if he must, then at least keep him confused as to what a deeply prayer-like state is. They want the patient to think that just being in a devotional mood without concentrating or having any sort of wisdom about his prayer is enough. Sort of like the opium-addicted, depressed, and anxious poet Coleridge, who was a transcendentalist that it talks about in letter 4. Coleridge was a poet in the 1700s, I believe, and he was just like transcendental in thinking, and he was a weird guy. It says in letter 4, in regards to a beginner in prayer, to, quote, have an effort to produce in himself a vaguely devotional mood in which real concentration of will and intelligence has no part, as the poet Coleridge said, to not pray with moving lips and bended knees, but merely composed his spirit to love and indulged a sense of supplication. So as Screwtape says, that's the sort of prayer we want. That's the sort of prayer he wants his patient to have, rather. And since it bears a superficial resemblance to the prayer of silence, as practiced by those who are very far advanced in the enemy's service, clever and lazy patients can be taken in by it for quite a long time. So they also don't want the patient to go anywhere in spiritual education of their own prayer life. When we pray, it's a very real and open communication with God. We know this, but it's also an open communication with God and His grace. Here is a perfect outline of the battle on 3 fronts between Screwtape and Jesus on prayer from the mind of Marlon De La Torre. To have I-centered prayer and not Christ-centered prayer. To pray for things for myself and not others. Praying for ourselves isn't necessarily wrong. We should do it. For food, clothing, shelter, all those other things. But genuine prayer for others in our life will draw amazing blessings to our own life. It goes back to Jesus, when he said in Matthew 16:25, for whoever wants to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Maybe for every prayer for yourself, maybe pray 5 things for someone else. Then we'll never be a Screwtape statistic in this first point. The second battlefront is superficial holiness versus interior holiness. We've either seen them or been them in church. We have that sort of facade or that fakiness, I guess you want to call it, that we present to others when we're around them. And then outside of church, we're even worse, at times. This is a dangerous, non-Catholic life to live, honestly. And I say that to myself, too, because there's times I've been very guilty of this. I just talked to a friend of mine today about how we struggle with looking around during Mass, sizing people up in our minds instead of focusing on adoring Jesus and being present at Mass to worship Him. There are certain characteristics of the people of God. Marlon lays out 7 of them, but I'm going to focus on 3 for now and maybe leave the rest up to you to really chew on yourself if you get the study guide. One of them is a characteristic of us entering into the kingdom through our baptism. Being baptized, if you didn't know, and maybe you do, being baptized doesn't mean that's our ticket to heaven. We enter into the kingdom through our baptism, meaning it's a start, it's a promise we have provided we continue in the faith, according to Colossians 1:24. Another characteristic of being a people of God is to live the commandment of love, to struggle every day to love those around us and to give of ourselves in service. It's a great work and sometimes very difficult to love, but it's a habit I'm really trying to develop in my own life. Sometimes it's hard to love someone who's not showing you love back, but God still calls us to do it. The third one of the 7 is that our journey to heaven is a preparation. This is a major characteristic of someone who is a Christian. As I've said before, our entire life is one big preparation for heaven, and everything we say, do, feel, act, all of it, they're all works that go along with our faith. Like I said in the last letter, the entire Bible screams that our life here on earth is one big sifting for what is to come. One of the greatest prayers we can pray is the Our Father, of course. In Catechism 2761, it says that the Our Father, it's basically one big summary of the entire gospel wrapped up in one prayer. It covers everything. Maybe one thing I could challenge all of you to do after we're done with Lent is to really read and meditate on the entire New Testament and to read and focus a lot of your time on the Catechism in around the 2500s to the 2600s in the Catechism. Just everything from 2500 to 2700. Doing those 2 big things will honestly help us grow really strong in those 7 characteristics that Marlon lays out in his study guide. So as you may have guessed already, Screwtape and Wormwood hate all this stuff. Going back to the beginning, they just want to cause confusion, complacency, and indifference in the life of the patient. Remember that. Confusion, complacency, and indifference. This brings me to the last things I'll leave you with for today. The most sinister part of this letter. The first time I read it, it gave me goosebumps, or if you live in Hawaii, we say chicken skin. It's when Screwtape says, "It is funny how mortals always picture us as putting things into their minds. In reality, our best work is done by keeping things out." We do always think the demons are always putting thoughts into our heads. You've heard, I'm sure you've heard it said when you were younger, Satan made me do it. He gave me that thought. But they're more inclined to keep thoughts out of our head. It's actually quite the opposite. I know this is a fictional book, but C.S. Lewis gives us excellent insight into how Screwtape thinks, and this is the biggest giveaway so far, I think. They want to keep us from learning, from growing. We grow by inputting thoughts and knowledge and wisdom into our hearts and minds. If they can keep it out, then confusion, complacency, and indifference ensues. Screwtape doesn't want prayer and basically communication with God, because then Christ can intercede, and can intercede immediately sometimes. Another thing is to misdirect the patient from focusing on Christ to focusing on ourselves. And they do it by getting us wrapped up in feelings. One example was, instead of building courage, for example, they want us trying to have feelings of bravery. Do you see the difference? Having feelings of bravery is fleeting and it's always changing. Building courage helps you build in virtue, which strengthens your character as a Christian. Adoration is an excellent weapon too. And it's one way we can, as Screwtape says, attend to the enemy. That's why in my the Y Disciple youth group that my wife and I started at our church, we have adoration every month on Thursdays. And it's just a time, if you don't know what adoration is, it's a time when the Blessed Sacrament is brought out, it's put in the monstrance, and we just simply stay silent and adore Christ. And I've had a lot of strengthening happen. It's kind of like going to the gym and, doing an entire huge workout where you've just gone nuts in the gym and, sweat your rear off and you leave just totally spent. That's how I feel sometimes after having gone to adoration. But so we need to spend time simply adoring Christ, talking with him and being in his presence. Lastly, Screwtape and all demons hate the incarnation. It brings to our reality the reality that God can save us through Jesus. And if we believe that knowledge and live out that faith in our life, we will be absolutely unstoppable, I promise you. Well, that's it for today. I hope the sound was better. I'm working daily to get this right and to constantly weed out the things that work and the things that don't work so I can bring you the best quality video I can give you. Thank you for supporting me. I appreciate it. As always, you can reach me at jgoodman.deepadventure@gmail.com or at bearschoolofmanliness.com, where once you sign up and become a member, I can help you get plugged into a good group of men. Every 2 weeks, Bear brings all of us together as someone is chosen to give a talk that week meant to build us up and strengthen our relationship between us and God and our community. So please join us. If you feel in your heart to donate to my show, my Venmo is at jgoodman75. My PayPal is teamdojo@gmail.com. So enjoy your day. Keep fighting through Lent to bring light to the dark areas of your life, of our life, and work to uncover what is keeping you from being closer to Christ. And also pray for everybody doing this. Pray for everybody listening to this, that we allow Christ to keep changing us and helping us grow and keep sifting us through the dark parts of Lent, honestly. So I'll see you all tomorrow when I'll have another special guest for Screwtape letter number 5. This has been letter 4. Peace. I'm out.